Good evening and welcome to the Joy of Living speaker meeting. My name is Marcela and I'm an alcoholic. Let's start this meeting with a moment of silence followed by the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for a membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to state this meeting is being recorded and it'll be available in our YouTube channel in a few hours. And tonight, I took the liberty to invite a very good friend of mine. I met Pete. How long ago did I meet you, Pete?
2017, May of 2017.
I met him in 2017, and I think like a year and a half ago, I heard him addressing a crowd of 400 people. I was really impressed with his share. And he's been sober forever and ever. And I hope that you'll enjoy his share as much as I did when I heard him. Okay, Pete, and Pete is going to share for 30 minutes and then we'll open for discussion. Pete, whenever you're ready, we'll hear you.
All right, thank you, Marcela. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your group tonight. My name is Pete. I'm an alcoholic and I'm recovered today by God's grace and mercy. My sobriety date is May 27, 1997. For the life of me, I don't know why it turned out to be that day. I don't know why that was the day of my last drink. I didn't have really, I didn't have any confidence that that would in fact be my sobriety date. I'm the kind of person that, essentially it took me 10 years to get 1 year sober. It was through a great deal of experimentation, a great deal of research, and a great deal of drinking that led me to conclude that there was no way that I was going to be able to do something on my own about my drinking and my use of other substances. Nobody was more surprised than me that I turned out to be alcoholic, because, for the life of me, I never knew what being an alcoholic meant, right? I thought that the things that happened to people that drink made them alcoholic, right? For years, I would have opportunities like this to speak, and I would share that, I grew up in an alcoholic household and I saw how people drank and I did what they did. And I guess I was born an alcoholic. And I don't know if my upbringing caused me to be an alcoholic. I know that there was plenty of evidence, plenty of reasons, and plenty of things to base not drinking on. You know what I mean? Like it was no surprise to me that alcohol causes problems for people. And I knew at a very young age that when adults were around and adults were drinking, that there was likely to be some trouble. People would start drinking and I would get uncomfortable. I would get fearful. And I would do things that I decided to do that would give me comfort, right? I would do different things. I'd be a comic, or I would be a bully, or I would get bullied, or I would put myself into situations that damage my health, or I would pretend to be sick, so that I would get attention and maybe take some of the emphasis off the drinking. I did different behaviors, but the point I'm getting at is, I didn't grow up in an alcoholic household. I grew up in a family, of people that they were hard drinkers. They were people that drank a lot when they drank, and when they didn't drink, and they weren't preoccupied with drinking. And like I said, I thought that the police, breaking up fights between my parents meant that they were alcoholics. I thought that DWIs and being in 302 meant that somebody is an alcoholic, and it doesn't. What makes me an alcoholic is the fact that when I drink alcohol, when I take alcohol into my system in any quantity whatsoever, something happens to me that doesn't happen to the average drinker. I get a reaction to that substance that causes me to need to drink more alcohol, regardless of the circumstance, right? Like that's the defining characteristic, coupled with a mental condition that tells me I don't have that physical condition, right? Alcohol, our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, says that men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. That means, the wine snob drinks for the same reason that the ghetto bum drinks, right? Like they drink for the same reason. It produces a sense of ease and comfort. And I don't care who you are, I say this all the time. You put enough alcohol in Mother Teresa and she's going to swing from the chandeliers with her top off for some reason, because alcohol is a drug that causes us to act, crazy, right? Like extemporaneously, I believe is what the book says, right? So, alcohol, regardless, and although reaction happens and it causes me, to use more of that substances in spite of everything I know about that substance causing me all of these catastrophes in my life, when I finally darken the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I hope to be, the last time that I put down the drink, it wasn't the worst, it wasn't my worst episode. I've been in worse situations. I've been in bigger crises. I've been in more life-threatening situations. It was just, I got to a point where, I'm just about 30 years old, maybe a little older, I think 30, 31. And I'm so sick and tired of clawing my way back from some situation that my drinking got me into, either joblessness or homelessness or losing somebody that I loved, or missing out on opportunities, watching all my friends, get married and have children, and I'm doing my thing, right? And thinking that my thing is a lot of fun, and thinking that I'm making decisions because these base decisions to do things that I wanted to do, having no idea that deep inside me, I was in decisions that allowed me to keep on doing what I love to do, which was to drink and use other substances. I would get into, I would get jobs, and then because of my performance, I would lose jobs, and I would blame it on the economy, and I'd go out and get another job and get rehired, and I'd lose those jobs, and finally till all of the opportunities that I was pursuing, they all left me. I had challenges being awake during the day. I stayed up late at night, so I thought to myself, I'll go work in a nightclub. And I worked in nightclubs for years as a security person, and all I had to do in my job as a bouncer in a nightclub in New York was basically greet people and check their name off a list and drink and do drugs, and all I wanted to do. And I did that for a number of years. And even then, because of what happened to me when I drank, I could not even show up and do that, because somehow, for some reason, the things that I like to do, they caused me to be dangerously antisocial. Like I would show up, in a tuxedo, fancy, all decked out, manicure, pedicure, and then I would start to drink. And I would think to myself, man, it would be so much better if I was just in a hotel room all by myself. And I would leave. I would just, walk away from my job, and it would take me into these places, because, what my mind says is that, I have what I have, and I don't want anybody else to have it. And I'd rather be alone and isolate and use these things than be around you, even though it was like a party atmosphere. You know, I was surrounded by thousands of people, yet I felt constantly alone. You know, I had you know, everything that, you know, a young man in his late 20s, you know, you would think I would want, yet I was constantly alone, you know, and I had no idea that the thing that was causing the thing that I thought was giving me the relief was actually causing the problem. You know, I had bouts of recovery during these times, right? I had bouts of recovery when I was going through these periods, you know, the job losses, the moving, the relocation, all of those different things, the hundreds of different phone numbers and never have the same car and all those different things. But I knew that, you know, somehow I needed to do something about this condition. And I thought, you know, like I said, I wasn't convinced that I was an alcoholic for a long time because I used drugs too. You know, it kept me out of AA, and that was because you know, I never knew what being an alcoholic was. I always thought, like, you know, there was going to be some.
Close your video so that we can hear you better.
Any better?
Yes.
You know what? I have, unfortunately, they're on the internet constantly, and it's a battle for bandwidth, regardless of what I do to try to get better bandwidth. So I apologize. I wish I could do better. In any case, like I said, you know, like I didn't know technically what it meant to be alcoholic. I thought that the repercussions and the things that happened from drinking caused me to be an alcoholic, and that wasn't it. And, you know, and like I said, when you know, I had gone through periods of trying to get sober, both with Alcoholics Anonymous and without. You know, I had whoever wrote anything about addiction or recovery, I tried to research it and try to get some information. And I just, you know, for the life of me, could not arrive at a point and where we have to get of being hopeless. There was always going to be some way, some different method, some different group. I remember once there was one I tried to go to called Rational Recovery, where I could, you know, where you can use these substances every so often and be okay with it, and that it was going to be, you know, some type of therapy that was going to make me feel better about it. But every single one of them ended with me thinking to myself, you know what, Pete, look at your life. You must have been making too big a deal out of this drinking. You must, you're making too big a thing out of it. Plenty of people have problems every once in a while. And I always thought that, you know, there was going to be a way, there was going to be some way that I was going to be able to just moderate my drinking. And what I learned very clearly from recovered alcoholics in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, that day, if I am in fact an alcoholic, that day would never, ever come. I've crossed over the threshold, Mike. The condition has caused me to never, ever, ever be able to safely use alcohol in any quantity whatsoever. And when I heard that, I was bummed, seriously bummed. Like that was bad news. You know, it was either the first or second meeting I got another dose of bad news. Is that you know, somebody told me that if I have this condition as defined in the AA literature, right? So if I have this physical allergy coupled with this mental condition, that there's no human power or no mental defense I'll ever have that's going to keep me from using it. And if I thought that the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous was sufficient to stay sober, that I was going to die a drunk. I would eventually one day be susceptible to the mental blank spot that precedes the first drink, and I would take a drink. Because I was going there with the idea that what I was assembling was defense and some human aid, right? Everybody, you know, when I'm feeling horrible, I owe people money who you should not owe money to. I'm doing things, you know, like I'm borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. Anytime anybody saw me, they crossed to the other side of the street. I'm living a despicable life. And here I go in Alcoholics Anonymous, and everybody tells me that I'm the most important person that they're there for is to help. To me, like, I've heard that before, you know, and that just, to me, that was just a green light to absorb everything and anything that you people would give me, tell you anything that I thought you needed to hear to give me more. And I would just absorb everything I possibly can until I wore out my welcome and you sent me on my way. You know, I was selfish, self-centered, and self-seeking. I cared little about what you thought of me or what you or what I did to you. The only thing that I was, you know, as being, you know, a very big manipulator was it was just like if I thought I would jeopardize my opportunity to take more from you, you know, and I had no idea that what my life and the way I was living it had caused me to become. You know, it had caused me to live a life that was conflicting with what I knew deep in my heart, that the way my God would have me behave and act and treat other people. And I had no idea when I got here just how sick I was. You know, like I said, there were no, ambulances and funny farms and straitjackets and all those things. All it was for me is that I just was so sick and tired of living the way that I was living. And I was just so sick and tired of trying to pick up the pieces and put it back together again that I just felt like I just need to give up. I just had to give up. And I knew I thought I knew enough about Alcoholics Anonymous that it was worth a shot. You know, to be honest with you, to be 100% honest, I had stopped drinking for 7 days on my own, and I felt like I was going to drink again. I wasn't going to make it another 7 days. I thought if I went to an AA meeting and met a girl who was trying to stay sober, we could stay sober together, and that would be a good way to pass the time. You know, that was my strategy going into my mind. And you know, it's funny because when I called the AA helpline and I asked them where the meeting was, they directed me to a meeting, but they didn't tell me it was a men's meeting. And in that men's meeting, thank goodness, I met a man who told me the truth about my condition. After the meeting, I listened to the meeting. I listened to everybody tell me how wonderful and special I was. You know, this man came up to me after the meeting, and I put my hand up. I said, "My name's Pete. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I need some help. I heard about a sponsor. I think I need a sponsor." And this guy, he came up to me after the meeting and he told me about the program of recovery. And he took me around the corner to this AA clubhouse and he stole a big book for me. And he told me that the program of recovery, the actual program, is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he's holding this little tiny blue book in his hands. I'm saying, where's this big book at? What do you keep saying big book? Like the Atlas is a big book. That's not a very big book. Everybody, I don't know why people keep calling it a big book. It's not very big. And he, he tells me these things and I'm like, all right, well, so I'll start reading it. And, all of my starts and stops in Alcoholics Anonymous were always really, really passionate, aggressive starts and stops, right? Like if it's like going on a diet, like, oh, I'm on a diet, right? I empty out my cabinets and, where the only things in there is styrofoam and cardboard, right? Like, that's the kind of person I am. Empty all the bottles, get everything out. So, I'm thinking to myself, that's what I'm going to do here. I got this book. He said, start reading it. So I start reading it from the foreword on, and I forget how far I got, but I read the first night, and then he said the thing he said before I started reading. I'm sorry. He said, do me a favor. He said, you got a car? Come and pick me up tomorrow. I'm going to take you to a step meeting. And I said, oh, okay, great. Now I hear this guy, he needs a ride to a meeting. You know what I mean? I'm not even thinking like he's trying to help me. I'm thinking that, he wants me to give him a ride. That's the only reason why he's asking me. It's bizarre. Here I am feeling like, like just a gigantic turd. And then in 1 second later, I'm thinking, this guy needs me for something. And, I'm reading some in the book. I'm not really making sense of it all. And we go to this next meeting, and that's where I ran into the individual that told me about this disease of alcoholism, and that if I had it, there was no human power and no mental defense and no strategy, no new code of morals or better philosophy of life that was going to save me. And I was at the step meeting, and everybody there, like, they were telling me how wonderful I was, except for this one man who told me the truth about the condition. And I'm so grateful, I'm just so grateful for somebody who finally told me the truth and didn't consider the fact that I was going to be offended by it. They weren't afraid of my feelings. He wasn't afraid that he would scare me off. He wasn't afraid of wondering if I'm never going to come back. He told me the truth about this condition, that this condition is deadly, fatal, progressive. It only gets worse, never better. And that the only hope I have is to find a power greater than myself to remove the merciless obsession. And if I don't find that power, I will eventually one day pick up and drink. I don't know how far I am time-wise, so you just tell me when to shut up, Marcella, and I'll shut up.
No, you have like 10 more minutes, Pete.
Okay. So, for me, that was my jumping off place. I went home, I started reading some more, and I got to this point, right at this point, I have like 9 days sober. I'm like sober for 9 days, and I'm reading the book, and I'm reading Bill's story, and I'm relating to what Bill's talking about, and I can't understand how a God that I don't believe in can actually remove the obsession to drink. And this guy, I usually try to tell a funny story about that, but I'm just gonna say I just couldn't understand. So I call this guy who's my sponsor at the time, and I just used the rabbit ears, right? My sponsor, because I didn't even know what a sponsor was really, but it sounded good. And I asked him, how does this happen? How does this work? And God bless this guy. He tried to explain, the principles, and I'm as sober as I'm gonna be, right? Like I'm 9 days without a drink. Alcohol's out of my system, and I'm just not making any sense of anything. And he said, you know what, Pete? He says, at this point in time, you can pray in disbelief. You don't have to believe anything. All you have to do is ask a God that you don't believe in to remove the merciless obsession, and I believe that a merciful God will come in and help you. At this point in time, I'm obsessed. I don't know if I'm going to make it to the next day. I'm completely obsessed. I remember what Frank said about getting on my knees and asking a God, to remove the obsession, to finding a power greater than myself. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to try it. And I'm just going to try it. I just had enough willingness. I knew that if I didn't do it, I was probably going to drink. And I knew if I did it, it didn't matter anyway. And when I got on my knees, and I humbly, in the most humblest way I can, is I just asked this God that I didn't believe in to please remove the obsession. And I got up off my knees and I looked out the window, and no bushes were burning, and the earth didn't open up, and I was like, well, that's no big deal. And I went to bed, and I woke up the next day, and for the first time in quite a few years, more than a decade, I just did not feel as though I had any need or desire to put a substance in my body before I left my bed to go take a leak, to use the bathroom in the morning. It was removed. And I don't care who you are, the most eloquent person, the most sophisticated person, the smartest person in the world, you can tell me that, that was coincidence. You're now 10 days away from drinking. The obsession went away. It settled. You can't tell me that wasn't the hand of God. That you couldn't tell me that wasn't the hand of God reaching in and doing for me what I could not do for myself. And for me, that was what it took. I knew that the obsession was removed. It just was that, and I knew that I was going to pursue it, as aggressively as I possibly could. The obsession was removed. Right from that point, I started working on my fourth step, and I did a thorough fourth step with Yui, and read the book, and I'm doing real well. People are trusting me, right? I'm showing up on work Monday to Friday, right? Every day I'm supposed to be at work. I'm going to work. I'm getting responsibilities. I have the ability, to communicate pretty well with people, and so my company thought I was able to relocate, and they relocated me to Tennessee, and I moved a mile away from an AA clubhouse and 2 miles away from an all women's halfway house. The perfect combination, for a man, eagerly pursuing recovery. And, I spent a lot of time, when I was supposed to be working, going to AA meetings. And I spent a lot of times when I wasn't in AA meetings, supposedly carrying the message at the Women's Halfway House. And I was doing a lot of damage in recovery. I was doing a lot of damage not drinking, under the guise of pursuing my recovery, pursuing recovery. And that was probably, 90 to 120 days of some really, really sensitive parts of my recovery, my early recovery. And I was getting to a point, I was behaving, in ways that were inappropriate. I had a piece of paper that said resentments on it. And every time I shared at a meeting, I told everybody I'm on my 4th step. Right. And if I was at a 9 o'clock meeting, I heard something clever, I would share it at the 10 o'clock meeting, all these things, getting sober. And all of a sudden, I'm about 90 days sober. And this guy who I'm running around with, he was a kind of guy who was like sober in this clubhouse for a year, and then he drank. And when he came back, everybody cheered for him. And then he'd drink for a couple, he'd come back and everybody would cheer for him. And I started thinking to myself, what my recovery could use at this point is probably a little relapse, right? Let me revisit the alcohol just to get my program back on track, get back that aggressiveness, that eagerness for recovery. And I'm putting it together in my mind, right? Like I could feel that it's coming. And I walk into an AA meeting one day, and this guy who's in there, he was, a librarian at the University of Tennessee, probably weighed about 110 pounds, soaking wet. I'm like 6'3", 255. My blood pressure's 130 over, 90. It's just crazy, all the time. I'm driving around with an axe handle in the back of my car, wanting to give out driving lessons to anybody who got in front of me. I'm just restless, irritable, and discontented, sober. And this man, God bless him. God bless the recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I went into the meeting that day, he asked me, how I was doing. I didn't look right. And I said, I don't know, Bill, my program's not working. And he, you can't see me right now, but he used to smoke a pipe, and he looked up from his pipe and he said, well, mate, you might want to try the AA program. I was like, well, you gotta be kidding me. I said, you and I go to 4 or 5 meetings a day, I read the big book. I chair these meetings. I do all these different things. He said, you spend more time with young women trying to recover than their sponsors do, right? He said, you spend more time in AA than you do on your regular job, right? You're not supposed to be hiding out in here. And you need to work the AA program. And I'll tell you this, AA saved that man's life, because if we weren't in the AA meeting, I literally saw red. I literally saw red. Like I never got so, I just remember it like it was yesterday. And I went home and I called my friend who was running around, and he said, Pete, people in AA are not supposed to take your inventory. You're supposed to take your own inventory. And I was like, you're right. How dare he? How dare he say that to me? And then I put down the phone and I started thinking about the things that he was saying. And I started analyzing and thinking about the way I was carrying myself. And I started thinking about that decision I made to turn my life and will over to care of God as I understand God. And how I said I was going to be a demonstration of my God's love, my God's will, and my God's way of life. And I started thinking about the things that Bill told me, regardless of my feelings, not that I wanted to hear those things. And he didn't mince words. He'd said it the way I needed to hear it. And I said to myself, he's right. He's right. And I asked him to be my sponsor, and together that man and I walked hand in hand through the rest of the 12-step recovery program, right? Like we identified, I did my 5th step with him. I hurry up and finished my 4th step. I did my 5th step with him. We identified some defects of character that I had. I became willing to have them removed. I humbly on my knees asked my God of my understanding to remove those shortcomings. I had a list of the people I harmed from my 4th step. I had some additional things on there that I didn't feel bad about, that I had to make an amends for. And I had this list of amends that we had to make. And he helped me prioritize the amends I could make now, the amends I can't make now, and the amends that I'll have to do at a later date. I walked through this 12-step recovery program with that man. I could just, like I think the book says catapulted it to another dimension. Like all the while knowing that everything I was doing was just getting me closer and closer to the source of this power, this power that I knew, that I know now, that sustains me. Just to wrap up, I'm just going to fast forward. I've had a wonderful, wonderful period of sobriety. I've been sober for over 20 years. I've had 3 children from 2 different women in 2 years. Don't recommend it. I have multiple jobs. No, I went from being next to unemployable to working for just the most prominent companies in the world. I've had a phenomenal career, not because I'm brilliant, not because I'm smarter than anybody else, but because I did what AA taught me to do. I showed up, I asked questions, I was there when I was supposed to be there, I left when I was supposed to leave. I did the things that I thought my God would have me be. I showed up and be of service to my customers. I try to think of what I'm doing as my opportunity to bring somebody good news. I've had a wonderful life. The last year has I've faced some health challenges that never once did I ever think to myself that this is insurmountable. Like I can't get through this. Like knowing that, what I'm going through is just what I'm going through, and I will get through it, and I will be fine. And that was challenging. Super challenging to watch my young son, 14 years old, have his body essentially disassembled 2 times in 18 months on an operating table, to have spinal surgery and have his spinal cord put back together, and having to get through that without finding it necessary to even think about revisiting those substances is just, I can only say it's only by God's grace and mercy that I was able to do that. And not only do that, like, oh my God, it was so hard. It's like I hardly even remember it. It's in periods like this where it brings me up, it gets me emotional. It's like, I don't know if it's by mindfulness practice or what it is. Like I'm totally present in the moment, going through what I have to go through. I don't project what it's going to be like 5 years from now or 5 minutes from now. I don't, guilt and remorse about what happened beforehand. I just go through it, present in the moment. I trust and rely on the God of my understanding to get me through those situations. And I get through them and I don't even remember them. I mean, as close as a week ago, I was going through this horrible, horrible thing. And today, 1 week later, I can't even remember it. I look at the pictures and I say, when was that? I don't know, maybe I have mental illness. I don't know what it is. But what I know is that if I take all those experiences, all of those, all of the successes, the stuff, right? All of the stuff and all of those things, like on the very, very top of the list, what I got out of Alcoholics Anonymous is a relationship with my creator that has allowed me to match calamity with serenity. And I know that there's no circumstance that I could ever encounter that is insurmountable, as long as I approach it trying to be a demonstration of my God's love, my God's will, and my God's way of life. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you so much, Pete. That was eventful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so now we have time to share. As I was listening to you, Pete, I just realized that I know plenty the other part of the story, right? But I think that this is the very first time that I heard your whole AA story. And what I can say is that it's very evident to me that we're never done with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're just never done. Like every time that we sponsor people, or like it's always new, the words are the same, but I have this old timer in another fellowship that says that the words of the big book are like water, and each one of us is a container, and we're just never done, and we'll never get bored, because the words of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous have a humongous impact on us, and it's always different, it's always exciting, it's always intriguing, it's always marvelous. Thank you so much, Pete. I love you. Hi, say hi to the boys and your beautiful wife. Okay, somebody wants to share.
Thank you, Marcella. I'm Angelo, a grateful recovering alcoholic.
Hi, Angela.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Pete, for your share. I could really identify with a lot that you were saying, and I appreciate your story. It's for me, it's going on 11 years this June, sobriety for me. That seems like a long time because I drank from starting at age 14 in my teen years, all the way up to the age 54. So that's what, 40 years. It's a long time to be an alcoholic. I was lucky that I was healthy enough to go through recovery and still function and still work full time. I was very lucky. And I just think that Alcoholics Anonymous is the most incredible program. I believe it saved my life, and I believe it is without a doubt a lifesaver for so many recovering alcoholics and drug addicts. And we just need to hang in there and keep going on it. It's one day at a time. The gratitude and just thinking about myself, and to rethink my whole way of living. I had to change everything. Was one of the things that one of the first messages I got when I first got into AA was one of the speakers who was chairing a meeting talked about how important it was to be humble, and I took that, I embraced that, and it helped a lot because it helped put things in perspective, and it can help you have an identity in a program where you have to think of yourself and think of your recovery and how important that is. But you also have to remember that when you're at an AA meeting, you're just one member in that group. If you maybe there may be 30 or 40 or 50 people at an AA meeting. Back in the good old days when we used to be able to go to those big meetings. Maybe someday soon, and maybe a year from now, we'll be able to do the same thing. But these Zoom meetings are great too, I must say. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo. Jeff from Dallas, Texas.
Perfectly. Yes, I'm Jeff. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you for letting me share. I had a 40-year drinking career, not dissimilar in duration to Angelo's. And I always felt like I was trying to solve a puzzle of how I could drink and not hurt my family. And it seemed like that was a puzzle that should have a solution. And I worked on it very, very hard for 40 years and had about as much success with it as you would expect. But nevertheless, my disease and my insanity drove me to continue working on that problem, almost like it was a Rubik's Cube, until I hit my own bottom when I realized that even the act of trying to solve the problem was hurting my family so much that I really couldn't stand it anymore. And I went into the rooms and thought that I had a problem with drinking. And so I figured AA is the right place for me to go, and went into the rooms and listened to what everybody had to say, and seemed like there were some people who would achieve some sobriety. And I took some of the information, went there for about 3 months and said, okay, I think that now I have enough information and enough practice that I can stop drinking. And I went dry then for the next 10 years and thought, oh, good, this program works. I stopped drinking. Isn't this great? It wasn't so great. I was still hurting people around me. I was still behaving in the same insane way. I didn't drink. I had gotten rid of the obsession to always be thinking about alcohol, but all the character defects that I had that had led me to be an alcoholic in the first place, I'll be darned if they weren't still there. And so after lots of feedback from friends and family that, yeah, we're happy you're not drinking, but things ain't so great, I finally capitulated and surrendered and said, okay, I'm going to suspend disbelief and go into the rooms and just do whatever I'm told to do and see if it works. Because I really want to have a relationship with my daughters and my son and my wife and my family and my friends that's not tolerating me, that I'm actually an additive factor to being in the room with them. I know that seems like a bridge too far for me, but that was something I wanted. So I went into the rooms, and the first thing I did was I got a sponsor. And the sponsor said, okay, you're going to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I thought, oh shit, I've really done it now. I travel all the time. How the hell am I going to go to 90 meetings in 90 days? But no, I said I would suspend disbelief, and I started doing it. And about halfway through and I went every day, no matter where I was. And about halfway through the 90 days, the worm turned for me. And instead of me getting up in the morning going, oh my God, how am I going to find time for this? I actually started looking forward to it. And I started working the steps. And I started realizing that my problem was a lot more and a lot different than just alcohol. It was me. And it was the way I looked at the world and the way that I behaved. And that was about 2 years ago. And it's been an incredible 2 years. I hope that I can have more years like this, but I've had 2 years and I have today. And when I listen to the other people share and to Pete's great qualification, my reaction is this program is a godsend, and it has so much more to offer than just helping me not drink. And I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to have friends like everyone in this room and people I can share experience with, and to have a family like I have. I'm just a lucky guy, and I really appreciate you letting me share. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm an addict, and I was just really moved by the last thing that you said about being. I think I got the words mixed up, but being a demonstration of the love of your higher power, and it's been around in my head, and I realized that it's the end of the third step prayer that I used to practice every day and haven't for a while. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, I don't know, that step that you apply the program into your life in such a way, and that you have a connection with your higher power that allows you to be that kind of demonstration. I would love to hear more about that, because that's really interesting for me. Thank you.
Yeah. What I know today is that what I knew about the God of my understanding last year continues to evolve, right? I serve a loving and merciful God that is all inclusive and never exclusive, accessible to anybody. Everything that I do, everything that I encounter, is the opportunity to demonstrate the love and the power of the God of my understanding. I was told that when I did the third step prayer, when I turned my life and will over to the care of God as I understand God, my life is no longer any of my own business. Now it's whatever shows up is mine to deal with. It's either a gift or a lesson. Right? And all of the lessons are gifts. I just have to continue to persevere through them without contradicting or going in conflict with how my God would have me would have me address that situation. And I learn from them and I grow. And I have fallen super short so many times. But what I've learned is that as long as I don't give in, as long as I continue to pursue that relationship, that all good things are going to happen. I always have the opportunity to make an amends. I always have the opportunity to forgive, get through the situations, and walk in the sunlight of the Spirit. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete. Jay, and then Tom.
Hey, y'all, I'm Jay. I'm a grateful alcoholic.
Hi, Jay.
And Tanya, you just inspired me. I actually think the second half of this particular speaker meeting could really be a question and answer thing for the speaker. That's pretty amazing. Pete, I just wanted to say I relate to you where whenever I was drinking, somehow it would feel more comfortable just to find my own way back home and like drink alone than drink with other people. I love that. And My question to you would be, what would you say to a person who is thinking about getting a sponsor, and how would they go about identifying somebody who would be a good fit for them?
So here's a funny story, Jay. I actually sought out, I suffer from another condition. I actually sought out somebody who I was convinced could not help me. Didn't sound like me, didn't do, yeah, I actually wanted to pursue that relationship to demonstrate that this thing wouldn't work in the other area that I have to deal with, right? So what I would say is to anybody who's contemplating the idea of getting a sponsor, just get one. Just get one. Sponsors are not gurus. They're not anointed. They don't have a great deal of knowledge. As long as the guidance they're providing comes out of the AA literature, right? Because let's face it, in order to address these conditions, all that's required is that we stop using them 100% entirely. We get relief from the phenomenon of craving. We need to grow spiritually and help others. Now, we have a 12-step recovery program that's clearly outlined in our literature that is 100% successful. It never fails if implemented according to how it's written in the literature. The only problem is that few people follow it exactly how it's written in the literature. So what I'm saying is find somebody who knows about the literature, who can point to when they give instructions or directions, who can point to where it says it in the literature, and follow what they have to say. What's the worst that can happen? The worst, not, you know what I mean? Because no sponsor can make you drink, right? If you're not going to drink, and no sponsor can get you sober if you're not going to get sober. That's human power, right? So just find somebody and follow the directions. Make sure that with the directions you're getting is in the book, and I can guarantee you're going to be okay.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for your service. I really appreciate you sharing tonight.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tommy, and I'm an alcoholic. And thank you so much, Pete, for your share. It was riveting, absolutely riveting. But there's one thing you said, and I'm going to try to quote it verbatim. One thing you said that is absolutely earth-shaking. You said, "He told me the truth." Ah, the truth sets the alcoholic free. That's what happened to me. I finally found somebody to tell me the truth about alcoholism, that it wasn't how much I drank or what I did. It was my inability to stop drinking, my inability to control my drinking. And for me, it went on into to the realm of it was my inability to control what I did when I drank. It absolutely drove me insane. And I was not a pleasant person to be around when I drank. But when coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was so blessed too. I knew nothing about it, nothing. I came looking for AAA. But when I found them, I looked in the phone book. I found Alcoholics Anonymous, call anytime. That's what changed my life. My last drink was the day before my first meeting. Now, I took a couple more drinks after that because I'm a hard sell. They said if an alcoholic who stops drinking and picks up again starts as though he had never stopped. I could not get my mind around that because I was so convinced. I was so convinced that if I could just rest up for a little while, if I could maybe a year, if I just stop for a year, it'll be good again. But those last couple of drinks convinced me that was never going to happen. And I was so blessed because I got back to the meetings and I never left. I never left the fold of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my goodness, what a ride it's been, because it's so much more than just sobriety. It's about how to live. It's about how to see things in the light of the truth and reality, and how to bring that into my life and change, not just change my life, but change everyone's lives, the people's lives. That, geez, I have a son that 45 years old that was born in my sobriety, for crying out loud. Can you believe that? But anyway, that's enough for me. I love you guys. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. That was awesome.
Thank you, Tommy. So we have still a little time. Pete, would you mind to elaborate? I love when you talk about how it is not human power, that is not the fellowship, that is not your beautiful sponsor, that is not like the group. Would you care to elaborate more about like the power that keeps us sober?
Sure. Look, anything I say relative to that ain't my words. Those are those are the words in the literature, we get driven to a point of surrender. And I really love what Tommy said about, like we kill people with kindness. Like we try to soften this message about the condition because, we don't want people to feel hopeless for some reason. We want to fill them up with hope. And before you can get hope in the 12-step recovery program, you have to be at a point of hopelessness, right? And the literature spells out that this is, it says, even when Ebby in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is talking to Bill, he's telling them that, belief in the power of God is required, right? Like that's unfortunately, and and I don't want to jump around too much in the doctor's opinion. He says that even before Alcoholics Anonymous came about, is that people were having this change since the beginning of time, that it required something more than human power is required to produce the essential psychic change, right? So, like I said, I don't think we're doing anybody a service in softening that message, that what is required is this connection with the power. The good news is all we have to be is willing to believe that there's a power. And then we have a whole process that's going to allow that to materialize in our life, right? And that when people, I don't know if this is answering the question, but look, if you're sober without the power or connection with that power, and you're sober because you go to enough Zoom meetings to keep the memory fresh of the last drink, you are by definition not an alcoholic. Or you are, but not of the variety that the book talks about. So I guess the whole thing I'm saying is that we've got, unfortunately for us, we've got to be driven to a point where we have to surrender and stop thinking that we can solve our problem, you can solve my problem, or, if everybody here is if everybody's powerless, where does the power come from? You know what I mean? Like you can't like it doesn't say everybody has a little bit of power. It says power. It says powerless. And if there is one that has all power, that means that there's, if you have all of everything, that means there's no other power. The only power we have as recovered individuals is the power of example. The power of example to show somebody that we can go from where they are, right, to where we are today. Living life on life's terms, walking in the sunlight of the spirit, carrying pride and dignity, grace in troubling situations, cease fighting everybody or everything. That's the power we have. That's the power of example. We have no other power. Does that answer the question?
I just asked you to elaborate and you did it beautifully. Thank you, Pete. Okay, so we have 3 more minutes. Does anybody want to take advantage of 3 minutes? Do you want to say something, Richard?
I'm Richard, I'm a grateful alcoholic in Grenadine of 86. Yeah, it is true that I came into the program because I found myself pacing across the room in this motel in Minnesota, waiting for the next morning. So Hazel will tell me whether they were going to take me or not. And that night was the craziest night of my entire life. And at one point I was pacing across the room and I fell down to my knees and I said, God, please help me. I'm dying inside and I don't know what's wrong with me. What's affecting me right now should not be affecting me the way that it is. God, please help me. And the following morning, I knew that they were not going to take me at Hazelden. So I called to see, because he told me to call first. And he said, I have a room ready for you. coming over. And all that I could reply between my cries was, thank you, thank you, thank you. And at that moment is when I began to be restored with some power. Because in the big book, it tells me lack of power was my dilemma. So I had to find a power greater than myself. And as a result of doing the steps, I have found a power that is greater than myself. And today I got power to burn. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Let's close with a prayer. Pete, would you be so kind to lead us in prayer?
Absolutely. The serenity prayer, we'll do the serenity prayer. God, please grant me the serenity,
Accept the things we cannot change,
the courage,
courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
God's will, not mine, be done. Amen.